Welcome back, Trailblazers. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to talk about a tool that has completely transformed the way I plan and navigate my hikes, AllTrails Plus. As a Trailheads ambassador and the organizer of the Yakima Valley Trekkers, I'm out on the trails a lot. One of my favorite features of AllTrails Plus is the ability to edit and create my own maps. Conditions change, fallen trees, washed out sections, or even a last-minute reroute. And with AllTrails Plus, I can adjust my route on the fly and share it with others so everyone stays informed and safe. AllTrails Plus also gives you offline maps, wrong turn alerts, and 3D trail previews to help you stay on track and make the most of your adventure. And the best part, you can get 30% off an AllTrails Plus membership with my exclusive link in the episode show notes. So whether you're planning your next big trek or just looking for a new trail to explore, AllTrails Plus has you covered. Check it out and let's hit the trail. Welcome to Season 11 of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and each week we're hitting the trail through conversations with extraordinary hikers from across the United States. This summer I've had the chance to sit down with some truly inspiring adventurers, and I can't wait to share their stories with you. From rugged summits to soulful solo treks, their journeys will spark your wanderlust and maybe even push you to take the next step outdoors. In this week's episode, we sit down with Melanie, whose journey from 2 simple overnight trips to conquering the Pacific Crest Trail, Colorado Trail, and Arizona Trail is nothing short of inspiring. With a background in nutrition, she shares how fueling your body with intention can transform the trail experience. From protein coffee rituals to the importance of macronutrients on Thru-Hikes, we dive into the highs and lows of her PCT flip-flop year, summit stories on the Colorado Trail, and the surprises of snow and storms on the Arizona Trail. Melanie also opens up about her trail name, Poppi, her adventures with her Aussie Butters, and the mindset that keeps her steady through both breathtaking sunrises and brutal storms. If you ever dreamed of a thru-hike but felt intimidated, Melanie's story proves that courage, community, and curiosity can carry you farther than you think. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Melanie. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really exciting guest with me today who's going to be sharing about all her amazing hiking adventures, both here in the Pacific Northwest, on the PCT, AZT, and CT. I'd like to introduce you to Melanie. She's going to be talking about all her hiking adventures. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about themselves and how they got started hiking.
Hi, Ivan. Thank you so much for having me on. Very exciting. My name's Melanie. Let's see, I'm originally from Northern Illinois, but moved to Portland, Oregon about 8 years ago now. I moved out here for grad school to get my master's degree in nutrition, and I've always just had a big focus on wellness as well. But I actually moved out to Oregon not even knowing if I was going to like the Pacific Northwest. It was my first time out this way, and after being here, it was just kind of one of those things where I fell in love with the area right away. Just the energy of Oregon, so much around the food culture, the hiking, just everything in this area. So once I graduated from school, I was like, you know what, I'm going to stay here for the time being. And 8 years later, I'm still here. But yeah, in terms of hiking and just where I got started with the outdoors, as I mentioned, I'm from Northern Illinois. So there's only so much hiking and outdoorsy stuff there. I'm not saying the Midwest isn't beautiful and all, but most of my hikes involved, going around lakes or parks and stuff like that. Funny enough, too, when it comes to like camping, my family was never into camping or anything growing up. Most of my camping or outdoor experience in that sense came from Girl Scouts, where, we were in cabins and stuff like that. So really, once I moved out to Oregon, it was, when I was in grad school, anytime I could sneak out for hikes and whatnot, I would do that with friends or my cousin. Then once I graduated from school, I worked maybe 6 or 7 days a week. I worked a lot, but anytime I could sneak out to get outside, I just always wanted to explore different little pockets of the Pacific Northwest and just slowly kept falling in love with it more and more and more. So that's kind of what got me started into hiking.
I always tell people that I feel like Los Angeles is one of the best cities for post-hike meals because you just have a smorgasbord of different options. But I always forget Portland is one of the best food cities in the country. And I imagine like being there for so long, some of your favorite restaurants and having a background in nutrition. How has that impacted your post-hike meals?
So actually, having a background in nutrition has had a huge impact, not just on like post hike meals, but actually, I mean, in general, just my whole resupply and plan of attack for trails. I'm one of those people where when it comes to whether it's really long through hikes, I'm honestly building my whole resupply box and plan and shipping myself boxes so that I can actually, focus on macro and micronutrients and making sure I'm getting the adequate calories and protein and stuff like that. And on top of that too, then when I'm in town, I'm that person that I'm always like so excited for anything, just fresh fruits and veggies, all the proteins that are not dehydrated or coming in a pouch or something like that. So it's actually crazy where it's, to me, taking care of yourself is so important, like on trail and off trail. I always cannot stress enough when it comes to wellness and nourishing yourself that when you're on trail, fueling your body the best that you can. I know it's for so many hikers, it's like the fun time to be able to be like, I can eat junk because you do have to get a lot of calories and you are doing a lot, but there's so many ways to do it with whole foods and different fat sources like nuts and stuff like that, where you can really pack in the calories and the macronutrients and doing it with whole foods and keeping it lightweight. And then same thing, like when you're in town, like getting maybe those fun meals and whatnot, but also getting those micronutrients in, going back to that too, just like my background is in, fitness as well. And I was a personal trainer back in my early 20s. And I always cannot stress that enough as well, where it's for hikes, you want to be, setting yourself up for success pre-hike. So, not just nourishing your body with the proper foods, but doing movement with purpose. So whether that's strength training or mobility, doing everything to stay, fit for life's adventures and summit strong.
I gotta ask you, Melanie, just because this summer I've been trying different summit snacks, and I definitely have noticed, especially over the last 2 years, like it's just as important to prepare yourself for the hike, leading up to it the days prior. Like I can definitely tell when I didn't have enough water the day before when I'm on trail on a weekend, as well as if I didn't eat enough food or the right foods. Is there any like easy tips or tricks that you'd recommend folks that are struggling with getting the right nutrition either before or during their hikes?
I mean, before your hike, just be intentional when you have access to everything. You're in a place where you can make sure you're getting adequate protein, just focusing on your water and stuff like that. And then in terms of when you're on trail, like I always say, go into it prepared and planned and get snacks ahead of time. Think about too, like I always just like to make sure that you've got a mixture of carbs, fats, and proteins. So whether it's, some jerky or nut butter or trail mix and stuff like that, getting different drink mixes to put in your water that maybe don't just help it taste good, but are also helping balance your electrolyte. One of my favorite things to do for myself personally for protein is I'm the biggest coffee drinker ever. I don't even care if it's decaf. I truly love coffee. And that is something that is like a massive trail ritual for me, that I will always have my protein coffee once or potentially twice a day. And I'll always do I will pack out 2 scoops of protein with just a bunch of espresso powder in there, whether it's something that I'm starting my day with it, or maybe I'm doing an afternoon coffee and saving it for when I reach a summit. It's such a ritual for me, but doing like little swaps like that. And just the biggest thing is just being intentional before you go out. And, I always think having the mindset of how do you want to feel and what's going to make you feel your best. Or it comes to nutrition, a lot of times it's like, I always think, sure, it might be really fun to eat sometimes like the really sugary snacks and whatnot, but is that really going to help you feel your best when you're going up that 2,000, 3,000 foot climb? Maybe find something else that also has a bunch of carbs and sugar in it, but maybe in a more natural natural form, like some dried fruit. So just being intentional about things.
Melanie, in your introduction, I mentioned that you've hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, the Colorado Trail, and then most recently the Arizona Trail. What first drew you to these long through hikes? Was there a moment when you thought, okay, I'm really going to do this?
So I actually kind of have an interesting story there where most people actually don't realize that if they haven't known me for a long time. But I mean, I live in Oregon now. So obviously just hiking around, I've seen the PCT blaze here and there. And there was always kind of like in the back of my mind, wow, I would love to do that someday. But it also was, that crazy idea of how do you just, almost like pick up and drop your life and just walk from Mexico to Canada? Like that just, to my mind, it just seemed so bonkers and just totally out there. And prior to the PCT, this is the thing that always surprises people. So I hiked the PCT back in 2023. Prior to that, the most time I had ever spent outside, like in terms of backpacking, was 2 overnights. I had done 2 overnights prior to the PCT, and they were both like not even like big backpacking trips. They were me wanting to do like a sunset to sunrise little jaunt. And like the first one was in Central Oregon up in Tam MacArthur. It was like a beautiful spot that I had been hiking, and I was like, I really want to go up there for sunset and then, sleep there and then watch the sunrise and go hiking around. So yeah, before the PCT, I had essentially no backpacking experience. Even just those 2 little trips that I took, it was, my gosh, I literally had like a Mountain Hardwear backpack that I just shoved some random camping gear and my essentials in. But as I said, the PCT was always just kind of in my mind just from hiking. And I had the classic story of, I was overworked with a job that I truly loved, and I loved the line of work, but I had no work-life balance. I was in a long-term relationship that I truly just, wasn't happy in anymore. And it was the summer of 2022. All of a sudden I kind of had in my mind, kind of like around August, that I was like, you know what? I'm doing the PCT in 2023. I decided I was doing it, and then, spent that fall and winter just looking into stuff and reading anything that I could and just learning about backpacking gear and, how to be more ultralight and what am I even going to need? How am I even going to do this? And, watching different videos and stuff about backpacking. I remember starting the PCT, and my mom was actually the one who dropped me off at a Campo. She flew to San Diego with me and then drove me to Campo. And I remember looking at her saying, I'm about to hike 20 miles today. Probably over the course of a day, hiked a consecutive of 20 miles just with like piecing hikes together. But I was like, I have never hiked 20 miles in one go, let alone a backpack on. And I'm about to walk all the way to Canada. And it seemed like absolutely bonkers to me, but it was one of those things where right when I started, there was something in me that just sparked. And I was like, I don't know what I'm starting, but I know I'm meant to be here. And I know I'm meant to do this. I had a very weird year with the PCT because it was a very high snow year, but I also say my experience ended up being truly like better than I could have ever imagined and almost like a fairy tale.
And Melanie, I'm glad you mentioned that 2023 was a weird year on the PCT because of the just insane amount of snow the Sierras got. What did you end up doing? Because I know a lot of people ended up coming up to Washington or skipping the Sierras and then going to Oregon. How did you handle the high snow amounts in the Sierras that year?
Originally, before I even started the PCT, I was like very dead set on, I'm going to go through, I'm going to, go through the Sierra. It's going to be beautiful. And then once I was in the desert, my brain was telling me, like, girl, you like the snow, but you don't like it that much. Don't do it. So it was one of those things where, funny enough, on the PCT, I got a trail family literally almost instantly. It was a group of us all actually started on the same day or like within a day of each other. All happened to meet on like day 2, day 3. And the 4/5 of us were pretty much the exact same hikers, all vibed together really well. And we ended up walking the entire desert together, all 700 miles, all the way to Kennedy Meadows. Every now and then someone would like disappear for a little bit, but we'd always end up back together. But then when we got to Kennedy Meadows, you're faced with, it was a very weird year where people were going through, flipping up to Washington, going to the Oregon Coast Trail. Certain people were like, we're going to Costa Rica. And like, it was a very weird year in that sense. Just everyone was all over the place. Half of my trail family ended up going into the Sierra with another group. And then me and one other guy, his name's Dave, or La Bamba by Trail, we ended up flipping up to NorCal together. And we did all of NorCal and then Oregon, Washington. And then I flipped back and did the Sierra. And it was one of those things where I have to say, I'm like, we both said it could not have worked out any better in the sense of, when we were in NorCal, it wasn't too hot. When we were in Oregon and Washington, we missed every single wildfire. Literally, the day that we got to Canada, a fire started, and within like a day, they started closing roads. And then even on top of that, when we flipped back to do the Sierra, it was wild because, again, with it being just such a weird year with snow, I think a lot of people bailed on their JMT permits too. So when I was in the Sierra, I barely saw anyone, which is like unheard of for that stretch, where I would have gone like at times like miles, half a day, maybe even an entire day without seeing anyone, camping by myself. It was, even on the PCT, it was wild. In Oregon and Washington, most of the time we were ahead of the pack. So there were so many nights that I just honestly was completely by myself on the PCT in Oregon and Washington, which for certain people, they might not like that. For me, it was like this solitude and quiet that I had no idea that I needed to just figure out stuff and mentally and, shape my perspective on like, where do I want my life to go? And, really just that soul searching time. And yeah, and then on top of that, I went through the Sierra at the end and ended up finishing with summiting Mount Whitney. So truly it was like the snow going into that year thinking, this is wild. Should I even be doing it this year? To it being the craziest blessing.
What an incredible experience, Melanie. And, when it comes to the PCT, especially if you're just getting into hiking and maybe dabbling into backpacking, it seems such like a daunting task that you have to, put X amount of miles in order to do it. But it's been so inspiring to have folks like you, Chickpea, Fry Pocket, where they had hiking and some backpacking experience, but not necessarily through hiking experience. And to have such a rewarding and amazing time on the PCT, I think really can help inspire people that are kind of thinking the same thing of like, oh, I would love to do it, but maybe I'm not there yet. Maybe I need to, get into backpacking or do shorter through hikes. But the fact that you were able to have such an amazing time on such a unique year is really inspiring. And that led you to do the Colorado Trail, did the Arizona Trail, and I know each trail is very unique and it's rewarding in its own right. Is there any like core memories from the Colorado Trail or Arizona Trail that kind of stick out with you that you catch yourself thinking about from time to time? As well as, was there any challenging experiences, not just on the AZT and CT, but also the PCT?
So in terms of the Colorado Trail, it's absolutely beautiful. It's truly the most amazing trail in terms of just the mountains, the landscape, everything. It's one of those that my partner and I both said, like, we would do that instantly in a heartbeat over and over. And it's like the perfect length. But in terms of standout points for that one, we set out with a goal of just trying to summit as many 14ers that were close to the trail as possible, where you wouldn't have to, as I said, there was like a whole list that we found of just ones that were within distance, that's not like you had to hitch to any of them or anything. So that was a really fun highlight of just, not just being like, we're just going to hike the Colorado Trail, but saying, how many 14ers can we also do? And there was one day that we did 2 14ers in one day. It was fun because we started the day with Mount Massive for sunrise. So summited that, hiked back down, packed up all our gear, then hiked all the way over on the Colorado Trail to Mount Albert, which is then the second highest peak in the lower 48. So we hiked up then that one. And the whole time we're thinking like, oh, are we going to make it? Because, Colorado is notorious for afternoon thunderstorms. And we're trying to do these 2 back-to-back 14ers, and the whole time the sky is just looking ominous. Being mindful of like, we don't want to put ourselves in a bad situation. We ended up making to the top. No weather moved in. Like the sun even came out at the end. And that was just like such a fun highlight to do that. And let's see. I mean, a challenge with the Colorado Trail was they always say like the best kind of window for that trail is, a little bit like just into August and then trying to finish up maybe halfway through September just to avoid snow and stuff coming in. And then usually their monsoon season, runs through July. So we were in the weird group last year where essentially monsoon season stopped for like a week and then it just came back full force in August. And even the locals were like, I haven't seen it this wet in August in years. So we're out here thinking like every day it was like, when is it going to rain on us? And luckily it's like Colorado where most of the time it was like fluke thunderstorms where they were just really heavy downpour on you for a while. But it's one of those things where in the moment you're definitely like, how are we getting rained on again here? And another thunderstorm. But like, I can't help but laugh at so many of the moments that we had together because of it. So that was definitely a challenge there. And then funny enough with the Arizona Trail, we ran into the same issue or I shouldn't say issue, but challenge with weather. This past year, Arizona in like all of spring of 2025, Arizona was in a drought. So we're thinking going to the Arizona Trail, like, oh my gosh, we're probably going to have, the craziest water carries. And that trail, you already are very reliant on trail angels. But we're going into this thinking like, man, this is going to be absolutely wild. There's probably not going to be like any water. What do you know? We got rained on and snowed on so many times during the Arizona Trail, where again, we're thinking it's a drought year and you haven't rained all spring and now it's all coming full force now. So it's always, again, just moments where it makes you chuckle and grow from it. But yeah, we just keep saying like, are we going to like next trail that we do, what is our weird, are we going to get rained and snowed on like crazy again? Or like, what is going to be the weird challenge? And then let's see, a major standout and highlight for that trail. I mean, there were so many different ones. The Arizona Trail is, I have to say, one of those trails that I always kind of heard that there's a lot of different terrain from it, but it's not until you actually hike it that you're like, wow, Arizona is like mind blowing in terms of like, you can be in the desert, you can be up on Mount Lemon, you can be surrounded by cacti, you're in the Grand Canyon and then back up in the forest. It's really just like such a varying terrain and has so much to offer. And probably one of my most highlighted sections was not just the Grand Canyon, because that's magical and beautiful in its own way, but seeing saguaro cacti in person, like for the first time. And I mean, I've been to Arizona and see them, but not until you're actually walking through like Saguaro National Park, where you're just surrounded by them and like standing next to them and realizing just how big and goofy these cacti are. So that was definitely a highlight of the AZT. And then the PCT, that's just a hard one. It literally has so much of everything, but oh my gosh, I don't even think I could choose like one highlight from the PCT. They always say your first through hike is your first love. And, she was really just amazing. The PCT was just beautiful and had so many different parts that I loved. But I will say Washington definitely stole my heart. Anything in the North Cascades, I know everyone gives the Sierra all the credit, but there is nothing more beautiful than, the North Cascades in my mind. I mean, challenges with that one. It's crazy because the PCT and actually all of my through hikes, I've for the most part always felt really good physically. And a lot of times it's just more of the mental challenges to work through, and not even in bad ways. It's like just the decisions of, like how I said with like the PCT, where it was a year of flipping, and at least I had to decide that I was going to flip. And, at times thinking what is going to be the best, and you don't always know. And one thing that I've always gotten better with each through hike is actually just a massive focus on mindset work and whatnot. And, I can't stress this enough, but there are so many times where no matter what the trail is, you're always going to have these moments where you feel so incredibly high. You had a big mile a day, you summited some mountain, you're just out there living your best life. I mean, you're on trail at the end of the day. Like, what could be better than that? And then you're also going to have those days where it's, you feel so low. You're caught in a snowstorm or getting downpoured with rain, or just something where you're like, what am am I doing right now? And, the biggest thing that I always tell myself is when you are at your highest highs, soak it all in, appreciate where you are and take it all in. And then when you're at your lowest low point, it's never as bad as you think. You're always going to get through it. Nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent. And the storm will always pass, whatever that storm is. If anything, you're probably going to get a good laugh or a good story out of it. So just through any through hike or backpacking trip or whatever it may, just enjoy the roller coaster that it is and appreciate every high and every low for what it is.
You answered it beautifully, and I think you're right. Whether you're day hiking, backpacking, or through hiking, it's going to be a roller coaster of a ride, and I'm really appreciative that you said take in the highs, understand that the lows are there, but they're not permanent, and you're going to get through it, especially if you have, friends or a trail family that can help you through those difficult, challenging portions. It makes a huge difference. I will say it always warms my heart when I hear PCT hikers say that Washington stole their heart, because I tell people, if the goat rocks don't get you, just wait until North Cascades, because it's something else. And I don't know if it's still one of the least visited parks in the country, but it's a hidden gem for national parks, not just Washington, but for the country. And I'm glad that you fell in love with the North Cascades. It's such a beautiful, rugged area of our state. And you kind of touched on it briefly, Melanie. And I got to ask, is there another long trail that's in your eyesight or in your scope that you're looking at maybe doing for 2026?
I'm pretty much always the person that has a never-ending bucket list. I always have adventures. I think that's one of the beautiful things, that I have a list of all these things that I want to accomplish, and I know I've only got a lifetime to do them, and I will not be able to do them all, but I'm going to keep trying. And in terms of trails, I don't know if it'll happen next year. I would love to do it next year, but we're definitely eyeing the CDT, especially because we're joking. I've done the PCT. I haven't done the AT yet, but my partner, he has done the PCT and the AT. So we just keep saying, well, we have to get you your triple crown. So it is potentially a 2026 idea right now. And if not, we would find some other trail. But definitely after I finished the PCT, I told myself every single year you are doing some sort of a trail, whether it's hiking all the way from Mexico to Canada again or some other jaunt like the CT and the AVT that we already did. So one trail at a time. And then there's also the whole can of worms of everything outside of the US that also keeps calling to me. So many trails to do.
Love that. And you're right. I feel like as soon as I cross off a trail, I add at least another 5 in its place. So it's a forever growing list.
Yes, I'm notorious for in the process of an adventure that I'm on, I will already start thinking, okay, how can I make this another adventure? We just did the Wonderland Trail. And when we were finishing the Wonderland Trail, I'm like, oh my gosh, we could totally make a small backpacking trip of going to the burrows and then doing a high alpine camp when we're not even done with Wonderland yet. That is just how my brain works. Always planning the next adventure.
And I'm glad you touched on the Wonderland Trail, because that's a really popular trail here in the Pacific Northwest. And you've been able to cross off some other amazing trails here in the Pacific Northwest, including there in Oregon. You were able to complete the Timberline Trail. You've gone out to the Three Sister Wilderness, which is just another world. The Oregon Cascades, especially around Three Sisters, it's something else. Has there been a trail here in the Pacific Northwest that surprised you, where, you kind of had some expectations going into it and then they exceeded it?
I feel like every trail, I'm always to the moon excited and happy, and they just all blow my mind in some different way, shape, or form. I will say the one that I just did in July was Lewitt Loop, and that's the one around Mount St. Helens. And it was really cool in the sense of it's not crazy long. It's 30 something miles. It's very rugged in the sense of there's certain areas where the trail is definitely kind of washed out and there's ropes hung up. So you feel a little bit more adventurous. And then certain areas where, if you don't like ledges, it's probably not the trail trail for you, because there are certain times where you're just like, there's just nothing beside me and kind of, loose sand. And it's not nearly as traveled as, say, like if you're doing the Timberline loop, you're going to have, not just people doing Timberline, but also day hikers and whatnot out there. Versus when I did Lewitt Loop, I did it in like a day and a half. My first day, I didn't see anyone until I got to camp. It was actually like very weird where for certain points, especially on the blast zone side, I'm like, am I on another planet right now? I haven't seen a soul anywhere, and I'm in this crazy blast zone area. But that is one trail that I've got to say, like, that one was very cool. I feel like literally every trail has been stunning and beautiful and amazing. And it's definitely been like the summer of loops for me. Like just did Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier, and then, Lewitt Loop around Mount St. Helens. I'm about to go do Three Sisters and Broken Top Loop here soon. I've done Timberline, and then I trail around Three Fingered Jack Loop. And that was a really, again, just a beautiful one. Each different loop kind of has similar characteristics, but also like their own personality so much for, doing them around all of the Cascades and whatnot. You're like, I can tell that you guys are all related, but you each have your own charm and personality, and I love it.
I love that. And I love the summer of loops. You have been absolutely crushing it. I do got to ask, most PCT hikers or through hikers get a trail name that's given to them along the way. And I was hoping you could share a little bit about how you got your trail name and the origin story behind it.
Yeah, so my trail name is Paparazzi, or Poppi for short. No one will ever actually call me Paparazzi, and most people don't realize that's where it stems from. But yes, Poppi for short, and it actually was given to me pretty early on in the PCT. I know I mentioned that I had a trail family like right from the beginning, and I'm a decently fast hiker, but in our group, I was always the person that would want to hang back or be the last person in the group because I love to take photos. If you do know me, you know that I take more photos than any one person should take on a hike or through hike or whatever it is. And, if you follow me on Instagram, you will see that I always post a ton of photos just because it truly brings me so much happiness. But in terms of like always wanting to be back in the group, I love getting the perspective of having a person in a photo, because a lot of times take a picture of like a cool mountainscape, at times you're looking at it and you're like, this is beautiful. But when you have that little person on trail, you're like, wow, I can actually see how big it is. Or like same thing, like I love when you're doing a hike and can see like in the distance the trail really far. And you can just see this tiny little line like on the ridge of something. And you're just like, wow, yeah, that's where we're walking, or we did walk. So essentially it was gifted to me because she noticed that I just took a lot of photos and always would try to get people in them. Or again, same thing, like if I'm ever out earlier or later and just see like way in the distance, someone's little tent pitched somewhere with like this beautiful like mountainscape in the background. Again, I'm just like, that's just going to make the picture so much, like give it just that extra little bit of life. So that's where paparazzi, or, as I said, Poppi comes from.
Melanie, you mentioned mindset being a really important factor when you're hiking and doing these long trails. And you were honest about your experience on the AZT, from having the highest of highs, visiting the Grand Canyon and seeing its majestic beauty, but also having to deal with the crazy weather that you experienced, from snow, hail, thunderstorms, and even cold temperatures. What was your approach in handling those highs of highs and lows of lows on the AZT?
Yeah, I mean, the AZT or any hike, it's just kind of like how I mentioned, where it's just having that mindset of the storm is going to pass, like the challenge is going to pass. Be smart in your decisions if it's something that's weather related and dangerous or whatever it might be. Just know that everything is impermanent and you're going to get through it. You're going to come out stronger because of it. And that's just going to be natural that you are going to have, especially like on a long through hike, you're going to have so many days where you do just, specifically have some lows, and it can be followed by the greatest highs and then go back to a low. And that's just going to happen. And, that's just part of the whole growth. But one thing that I've done this for every through hike, and I will continue to do it for any through hike, but always at the end of the day, I'll always do a small little journal in my phone, and nothing crazy, just kind of like put what the date was, the mileage that we did, where it was, if there's anything worth noting. And then honestly, I will always just say, write down one thing that brought me happiness or like a smile that day and something I was grateful for. And a lot of times, like for the moment of happiness or something that made me smile, I'll try to think like a little bit outside the box of something that's not just like right in your face, but those weird little things that you probably wouldn't remember if you didn't write them down. And then same with gratitude. It's just kind of like, it could be as simple as thinking about like on the days where it was crazy weather or whatnot, the smallest little thing like the sun coming out, or like specifically on the AZT, I remember after the Grand Canyon, we just got blasted by snow. Bless my partner for, setting up the tent that night and packing it up in the morning because it was just so snowy and cold and like everything was frozen. But then it was like we looked at the forecast and it was like kind of overcast and it said that there wasn't going to be rain. We're thinking like, we just don't want any more rain. What do you know? It ended up being like the storm of all storms, like crazy, crazy wind, pouring down rain, where you're just like, again, one of those moments where you're like, I'm just soaked and I'm cold. But then kind of flipping that mindset of, again, just knowing you're like, I'm not going to like die or anything right now. I'm just cold and wet. And then we ended up making it to Jacob's Lake. And if anybody knows Jacob's Lake, they have the most amazing cookies. So you went from wet and cold to I'm now sitting inside by a fireplace with hot coffee and eating cookies. And then the sun came out later that day. So it's again, just kind of knowing like everything's probably going to flip so fast from high to low. And that's just natural. And as I said, just like enjoy that roller coaster, enjoy that ride. Honestly, the best stories come from having that roller coaster. So enjoy it. If you were always high, you would never even appreciate all the other highs. Just enjoy it and have fun with it.
Couldn't agree with you more. Now, Melanie, switching gears, you have an amazing hiking companion, an Australian shepherd who goes by Butters, which I just absolutely love the name. How did he get started hiking? Was he a natural to it, or did you have to kind of coach him through the hiking process?
Funny enough, I've always wanted like an Aussie just for the reason that they're just good outdoorsy hiking dogs. I always was like, I want someone that can, be protective, but also go on runs or go on long hikes and all the things and be an active pup. And funny enough, as a puppy, I bought one of those backpacks that you could put your dog in for when like you go hiking and they can only make it so far. I have photos of him in the backpack, but he never wanted to be in the backpack. It was like right away as a puppy, I'm like, why are you already able to do this 5-mile hike? He was, I think, a natural born hiker. He knew what he was getting into with me. But yeah, he also did a little stretch of the PCT with me, which was really special from Mount Hood to Cascade Locks. Or from Timberline to Cascade Locks, I should say. He's just been like the best little adventure buddy. And, he's always down for a hike of some sort.
I got to ask because I've been seeing a lot more of it lately, especially this summer on trails where dogs of all sizes, I saw a little corgi having its own saddlebags, carrying its own water bowl and water and treats. Does Butters have their own pack, or are you packing some of their water and treats?
Yeah, so for his pack, he does have his own pack, and he usually keeps like his food and water bowl in there, and then his food and some snacks for the day. But otherwise, if we were going to be out for, say, 4 days, he would just have that day's worth of food, and then I'd have the rest of the food. And then usually I just carry all the water for us because I'm like, I've already got it in bottles or filtered. And half the time, he's just a spoiled little pup, and if the water's warm, he won't drink it, and he will always just go for that like nice running stream. And sometimes it'll be one of those things where it'll be like hot and there'll be no water around and he won't want to drink like the bottled water. And I'll have to put like dehydrated chicken treats in the water so that he tries to like eat the treats, but will also drink the water. Yeah, so he'll just carry some basics and then I'll carry everything else for him, including like a little first aid kit and whatnot, just because I would get worried. But even if he could carry the weight, I'm also like, it's hot out and you've got a massive fur coat. I never want to, overload you too much.
That's hilarious that you have to kind of coax them to drink warm water or room temperature water with dehydrated chicken. I noticed that you also run a dog treat business. Did Butters being on the trail with you spark that idea, or how did that idea come about?
Yeah, so I actually had my dog treat business prior to the PCT. And it was just like once got him as a puppy, it was just kind of like I'm a huge baker. My background's in nutrition and fitness, but also baking. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I could make dog treats for him. And I would just started making them for him. And then was like, you know what? I might as well turn it into a little business because dogs deserve to eat like whole foods and nourishing foods, just like I believe you do too. So yeah, that's just kind of what sparked it. And then I recently changed the name within this past year to PN Woo because I was like, you know what? I live in the Pacific Northwest. This is the perfect marriage of both.
And Melanie, if folks want to check out your dog treat business, where can they find more information about it?
It's just mostly through Instagram right now, and pretty much orders I just do through direct messages. So it's just PN Weave Dog Bakery, and you can find it directly on my Instagram as well.
And we'll be sure to put that in the episode show notes too so people could check it out. Now, Melanie, one thing I noticed during research for this episode is you mentioned that you have a soul nudge towards mountaineer training. Is there any particular mountains right now that are calling your name?
Yeah, any summit, I always say if a mountain could be summited, I would love to see it from the top. Mountaineer training is definitely one of those things where it's an undertaking to take on, but every year I'm kind of like inching a little bit closer where I'm like, I really just actually think I want to do training for it. Especially after doing the Wonderland Trail. Rainier is definitely up high on my list. I feel like that would just be, seeing the summit there would be just incredible to be at the top. Mount Hood is a very big one on my list. Even just random like Mount Adams I want to do. And as I said, just pretty much anything, but the top two would definitely be Mount Hood and Mount Rainier.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that next chapter of, start summiting some of these iconic mountains here in the Pacific Northwest. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like this year Mount Adams has been getting a lot of attention. There must be at least like a dozen people that I know firsthand that have tackled Mount Adams and are now looking, like you said, at Rainier, at Hood. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that journey takes you.
Yeah, I agree that Mount Adams is definitely one of those where I was telling my partner where it's like Mount St. Helens, it's definitely like you can summit it as long as you're, in good shape. Same with, any of the sisters. And Mount Adams, I feel like is like that kind of that good in between before like jumping into Rainier and Mount Hood. So that's why I'm like, it's just one of those things where it's just seeing every peak. I'm always just like, I just want to do every trail and every peak. Too many things, too little time.
That's a great segue because we like to do a segment here on the podcast where we do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram and we highlight a specific post or reel that catches our eye. And for me, it was that Mount Whitney sunrise experience that you had. You started hiking, I believe, at like 1 a.m. under the stars. You did some scrambling through some snow, and then you had this amazing sunrise experience on top of Whitney with, others there who also had summited. Can you take us back to that morning and what that memory means to you now?
So that was how I mentioned where like with my flip-flop year with the PCT, it was really cool in the sense of like my PCT journey was essentially ending with Whitney. I knew that it was essentially like my second to last day on trail. So that already was really special on top of it being, summiting Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the lower 48. Like that's crazy. So the day before summiting, it was actually pretty stormy in the evening. And it was one of those things where I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, if it's not clear, like I can't go climb up there. Like you just can't do that. It wouldn't be safe, or it would be one of those things where it's like if you're climbing up there and it's just completely socked in. So all night it's pretty stormy, and then I'm just kind of dozing in and out, knowing that you've got an early wake up call and could just hear the rain on my tent. And then my alarm goes off at like 1 a.m. and I peek out of my tent and can just see stars. And I'm like, that is the best feeling in the world right now. We have clear skies. So there were a few people camped at Crabtree Meadow, and then you have a lot of JMT hikers that go in from Guitar Lake usually. So set out probably around like 2 a.m. or so. And I mean, it's cool because you're just hiking in complete darkness. I mean, you have your headlamp and then, the stars and the moon above, and that's it. Gosh, I want to say Whitney, it's like 7 or 8 miles to the summit from Crabtree. And yeah, I mean, a good amount of vert. I don't even remember what the vert is off my top of my head, but it's a climb and so many switchbacks. But climbing up there, it's just, you just keep going. You just keep getting higher and higher. And then it was at a certain point, you can just be like, again, the glittery snow and then like scrambling over a little snow field, like you mentioned. mentioned. And then there was a group of maybe 10 of us up at the top. Some of them were like other PCT hikers that I had never met, but were doing the PCT. There was a group of JMT hikers. But by the time that everyone got up there, it was cool because everyone just started pulling out their sleeping bags right away because it's cold up there. And especially the top of Whitney had just gotten snowed on as well. We're like sitting there in the snow, all in our sleeping bags. Our sleeping bags are just like frosting over instantly. And it was just such a special moment in the sense of you're up there with a group of complete strangers and you all had the same goal to just get to the top of Whitney for sunrise. It's just this insane, like, stillness and quietness, but everyone just like there with the exact same energy and this instant connection you feel to these complete strangers. And that's, again, one of the things I love about the hiking community, how quickly you just connect with people. But it was such a special feeling to be up there and be thinking, not only am I at the highest point in the lower 48, but we're the first people to see sunrise that day. Like, we're awake before most of the world. We're seeing the sun before, everyone around us. It was just such a magical, still, beautiful feeling. And then again, there were like all these clouds whooshing in and out. So it made it just a very dramatic sunrise too. And it was one of those moments that will always just be one of those sunrises that sits with me forever. And then it was crazy because by the time the sun's up, you get other JMT or people that have, Whitney permits for the day coming up or other PCT hikers and whatnot. And it gets a little bit more loud and busy at that sense. And you're kind of like, you feel so special that you had such a quiet, peaceful, special moment up there. And then it was so fun because then hiking down, obviously, I was hiking up in the dark. So going down, I was like, this is literally feels like a complete brand new trail right now because I didn't see any of it on the way up. And the best part of doing it for sunrise is I always say, doing a climb right away can sometimes be tough on the body because you go from asleep to just climbing. But I've come to love early morning climbs because mentally you're not really realizing just how much you're climbing. So I love a good like climb or summit or ascent in the morning. But yeah, it was truly, after summiting Whitney, I was like, there was just that feeling again too, where I know I will do it again someday. It was just so beautiful and so special. And crazy enough, then the people that I ran into that gave me a hitch back into town after the PCT said they actually climbed up Whitney for sunset, camped up there, and then were there for sunrise. So instantly that put in my mind where I was like, well, next time I'm doing Whitney, I now know what my plan is. So as I said, always scheming up the next adventure while in the process of a different one.
Oh, Melanie, I've been dabbling with wanting to do Mount Whitney in 2026, but just the way you described that sunrise moment just like sealed the deal that I need to do Mount Whitney in 2026.
Do it and do it in the morning. Do it for, as I said, sunrise. Just make it happen. You will not regret it.
No, you got me sold. Now, before we jump into the regular questions we like to ask all our guests, for someone who's listening, who's maybe dreaming about their first through hike, but feels intimidated, like I feel intimidated at times of doing a through hike, what's the advice that you wish you had before you started on the PCT?
There's definitely like a few different things that I could give advice on, but my biggest one would probably be, especially in terms of like a big through hike, is don't look at it as one big through hike in the sense of, I remember looking at the PCT and thinking, I'm walking from Mexico to Canada. That's 2,655 miles. Depending on your hiking pace, that could take you anywhere from 100 to 150 days. That seems daunting. But in reality, whether it's the PCT, Colorado Trail, any trail, it's really just a string of multiple backpacking trips with town days in between. So it's one of those things where to look at it in that sense of, it's not 2,655 miles. It typically, how it works for me is with my hiking pace, I'm in town every 3 to 5 days doing 100 to 150 miles in each stretch, where it's looking at it from that breakdown of like, okay, I'm starting here and I'll be in town in 4 more days. It's just that backpacking stretch. And then again, just that stretch. And it's, breaking it down into its pieces, it seems way less intimidating than, wow, I have to walk all the way to Canada or something. So that's definitely one of my advices. And then the other big one that I have learned on every trail is definitely, go into it prepared. As I mentioned, like I plan out my resupply boxes, not saying that's for everyone, but, do some research ahead of time, know where you want to do your resupply plan, look into basics for the trail or what, the water situation looks like that year or potential side quests you want to do. Do your research, but also don't feel like you have to stick to a certain plan once you start. And on top of that, know that whatever you kind of dream up in your head, it's going to turn out way better than you could ever imagine, even if it doesn't go to plan. Like how I even mentioned with the PCT, where it was like the amount of time that I spent thinking about what am I going to do with the snow? And, the flip flop that I ended up doing was, better than I could have ever imagined, or even just, things that might not make sense in the moment. They always make sense when you look back. Like, there's always positive things that you can find in each trail and each day. And then I guess the last one would be definitely do not be afraid to go out there and do it solo. Again, going back to the PCT, one of those things where I remember like asking one of my friends before the PCT, because she was kind of interested in it too, but being like, what if we both did it? And she was obviously didn't want to do it, but it's one of those things where I always think like, I can't imagine how different my whole journey would have been if I went with a friend. And so if you're scared to do something solo, don't be scared. You're going to meet other people. It's going to be probably the best decision you ever made, even if it's just whether it's a through hike or backpacking or just a day hike. Like always, just never let anyone else stop you from doing something. Go out and do it solo. I will say now, like at this point, I can't imagine doing a trail without my partner, but it's one of those things where like prior to that, I'm like, just never be afraid to go out and do something. And even on top of that too, if part of your brain keeps talking you out of doing it, just remember that there is no perfect timing for anything ever. Part of your brain will always be telling you that now is not the right time or come up with an excuse. But the thing is, you do have to defend your wild and crazy ideas. And that's what life's about, defending those things and doing them.
Oh, I love that. Solid advice, Melanie. It's been on my bucket list, and I think a lot of people, they do look at it as like Mexico to Canada. It's that big stretch. But if you chunk it out, you piece it out, like you said, it's just a string of backpacking trips. And knowing that there's town days, and I know that some people, will take some time off the trail and then get back on. Like there's no one size fits all for through hikes. You make it yourself. And I think having folks like you share your experience, and the possibilities are endless on how you can tackle a through hike. And I love the fact that you said that you could do it solo. Don't feel like you need to have a friend or a family member, but just get out there and do it. Love that. Now, Melanie, these last couple questions are questions we like to ask all our guests. The first one is when it comes to, your day hikes or backpacking trips, is there any regular routines that you like to do, whether it's a summit routine or end of the hike routine? For a lot of us, it's packing that favorite snack or drink. For others, it's a moment of zen. And then for a lot of us, it's that favorite meal afterwards. Is there a regular customer routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or when you make it back out?
So I think I mentioned this earlier, but protein coffee is just always there. It actually, funny enough, became like my little ritual on the PCT where like towards the end of the trail, I was always hitting like 30-mile days. So the night prior, I'd always look at my Far Out app and just kind of like look at what my day was going to be like ahead, kind of decide where I was thinking about camping. And then I would always kind of choose like a mile marker around 10-ish miles that maybe had like a cool lake or something like that. And I'd always say that's where my first coffee break is going to be. And it was always, to me, it's in terms of like my protein coffee or whatever it is, it's like my ritual in the sense of no matter how many miles you have to hike in a day, or like even in real life, no matter how much you have on your plate for the day, there's always time for a coffee break and always time to just sit and enjoy. So that is one of my other big rituals. Otherwise, I always love a good snack anytime throughout the trail. Yeah, protein coffee is like my number one, always.
And then I'm interested in hearing your response to this one. After having thousands of miles under your belt, is there a luxury item that you tend to pack that falls outside of the essentials?
Funny enough, you bring that up because that was actually on the Wonderland Trail. My partner and I were just talking about our gear setup, and we're both pretty light with our setup and don't actually have a ton, but we have all the essentials that we need, all the essentials for safety, nothing where either of us are like, I'm sacrificing too much comfort. But the things that we were kind of talking about is on like a thru-hike, I'll probably always have 2 shirts, whether that's a tank top and a t-shirt or potentially 2 tank tops, because honestly, I love to hike in tank top. And partially that's just so that when I'm in town, I don't have to wear my raincoat everywhere during laundry, or I can just put on a fresh shirt. The other thing that I was actually thinking about this too is I always keep, not that this like weighs much of anything, but in my hip belt, I always keep like those little like rubber silicone toe spacers. And it's just because at night, every now and then or in town, just to put those on when you're like in the middle of a thru hike, they just feel good. And I always think too, I'm like, if for some reason like I was ever having like any weird tendon issue, my brain just tells me it might help or do something. So yeah, toe spacers is the other thing you will always find in my hip belt.
Love that. I might have to borrow that one too, because I've been trying different trail running shoes. I think I need to go with a little bit wider toe box, and those spacers would be so clutch when it comes to being at camp, just to be able to spread out your toes, get a little wiggle in there. I'm going to have to borrow that for my next backpacking trip.
And again, like they weigh like nothing. It's your self-care when you're at camp, toe spacers.
Now, we're a few weeks away from the end of summer and the beginning of fall, but there's still plenty of hiking left here in the Pacific Northwest. Is there any hiking or travel goals that you have for the remainder of the year?
So I'm definitely in like 2 weeks now, I'm going to head back to Central Oregon and do Three Sisters and Broken Top Loop. Again, I love Central Oregon. Getting one more go there. And then in September, I'll probably do just like a few random jaunts up in Washington. I'm thinking at some point I do want to go back to Goat Rocks, which is funny that you mentioned that earlier. Yeah, Goat Rocks, I haven't been there since the PCT. And I'm like, it's such a beautiful nook. Otherwise, just keeping my eyes out for when, you know, trees and stuff do start to change up in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, Oregon, it's not as good, but Washington, I mean, there's certain trails there where, you know, when you start to get that color change. So pretty much the one thing about me is that if it is my weekend, you can guarantee I am out hiking or backpacking or trail running somewhere. That is an absolute given. Yeah, I'm usually just not home on my weekends because there's just too much world to see.
Looking forward to seeing where the trail takes you here in the coming weeks and especially in the fall hiking season. Now, Melanie, the last section of the podcast is the this or that questions. I'm going to give you 10 hiking related topics and you just choose which one you prefer out of the two. And you're more than welcome to say neither or both. But the first one is if you had to choose between these two potential trail hazards, would you choose narrow ledges or creek crossing?
You're going to laugh. Actually, narrow ledges don't bother me. I had massive fears of narrow ledges in the past because there are a few too many times where I'd be like in a very windy situation and on a ledge. And once that happens enough times, you get over that fear. And at this point, it's like, I honestly enjoy narrow ledges. So I'll choose that over creek crossings.
And I think I know the answer to this one, but waterfalls or summits?
I'm a big summit girly. Although the Pacific Northwest has beautiful waterfalls, I love any summit.
And then this next one is a tough one, but if you had to choose between summiting a mountain and you had your choice of these two trail systems, would you choose one with switchbacks or would you rather just go straight up?
Yes, this one is a tough one. Because I was thinking about, I'm like, switchbacks are great. But sometimes I'm like, you just feel like you're going up switchbacks forever. But I will say if it's straight up and it's like straight up enough where you can honestly just start using your hands, then I will choose that all the way. But if it's just like an awkward straight up where it's just very steep, but then again, I don't know. I'd rather just sometimes get the miles done really quick and just get up that mountain. If I'm summiting it, it might be straight up.
And then our most controversial one is trek poles or freehand.
The only time you'll see me really use trekking poles is if I am backpacking. Otherwise, if I'm ever out hiking or trail running, I will always just have free hands. And then even if I'm backpacking with my dog, I'll only use one trekking pole because I just want a free hand for him. Pretty much at the end of backpacking season, my poles go away and get dusted off when backpacking season rolls back around.
And then this next one's about your footwear. Do you wear traditional hiking boots or trail runners?
Trail runners all the way.
And then I think I know the answer to this one because we talked about it previously, but if you had to choose between these two trail systems, would you choose a loop trail or a mountain back trail?
Definitely a loop. You're not crossing over the same thing again.
And then this is a new one for season 11. When it comes to cleaning up your gear after a trip, do you do it right away? And by right away, I mean the same day that you get home, or do you wait till later?
I am clean gear up right away, as in when I get home. It is honestly probably the first thing that I'm going to do before even showering. Very much unpack gear girly.
And these next two are really tough, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. But if you had to choose between a sunset hike or a sunrise hike, which one would you go with?
I honestly don't know if I could choose. This was actually something I was pondering for a while because I truly love both of them so much for their own differences. But if I had to choose, I think at the end of the day, I am always a very big morning person. And there's something about being up before what feels like the rest of the world for a sunrise. But I truly love both of them. Golden hour is honestly my favorite time of the day, always.
And then this next one's equally tough because I know that you've experienced both in tremendous fashion here in the Pacific Northwest. But if you had to choose between spring wildflowers or fall colors, which one would you go with?
This is actually an easy one for me too. I am all about flowers. So whether it's spring flowers or summer wildflowers, I'm just 100% a flower child.
And I think you experienced this year, Melanie, but I feel like this has been one of the best spring wildflower seasons in recent memory. The wildflowers this year was just remarkable, especially in the gorge.
Yeah, I was amazed getting back from the Arizona Trail. I was thinking man, I'm getting back I think it was mid-May at that point, and there were still ample amounts of flowers in the gorge. And then I've been telling people too, this year in the wildflowers for the summer have been incredible everywhere. When I did Timberline a few weeks ago, it was truly some of the best flowers I've ever seen in this area. And I mean, even just doing Wonderland, especially we had a very dry start to our summer, but the flowers have just been incredible this year.
Now, Melanie, the last one is if you had to choose between these two types of trail conditions, would you prefer wind in your face or sun on your back?
Sun on your back.
And that was it for the This or That questions, Melanie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. For folks that want to follow your journey here in 2025 and 2026, where are some of the places they can find you on social media and as well as your business?
Yeah, so my social media is just going to be mel.inthewild. That's pretty much where you'll find all of my adventures and whatnot. And then, as I said, my dog bakery is mentioned in my handle or in my description there as well, but it's just Pian Woof's Dog Bakery. So
awesome. And we'll be sure to put those in the episode show notes. Melanie, it has been truly inspiring speaking with you. I've added at least 5 or 6 hikes on my bucket list for not just this year, but for 2026. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Melanie. We extend a heartfelt thanks to them for joining us on the podcast. Be sure to follow them on Instagram at mel.inthewild and by checking out the episode show notes. This episode of Hikes and Mics was produced by Jordan Smith. Follow her on Instagram at jordan.journeys. New episodes will be dropping every Monday with occasional bonus episodes on Fridays. To ensure you never miss out on these thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to check out our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, ursaminoroutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, ursaminoroutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order.